Hey there, Dave.
Hi there, Wynne
Hey,
and
Wynne.
Vicki. Great to see you guys.
So good to see you
Hey.
too.
Hey.
Yeah, we're so happy when we get to see a returning guest come back. And Wynne and
Mhm.
I love the topic at hand today because we noodle on creativity and how to inspire people. And recently you wrote a beautiful blog post about a book that provided some inspiration, and it has a fabulous title. This was written by Felicia Day, called Embrace Your Weird, Face Your Fears, and Unleash Creativity. I mean, I'm in.
Right.
It's a bold
Yeah.
subtitle. Yeah. Well, actually, the whole thing is
Yes.
good. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, and you wrote a beautiful piece about it, and we'd love for you to kind of introduce, our listeners and viewers to the book if you don't mind, because there are lots of things out there, to try and help people get over the hump if they're in a slump, and how to really stoke the flames a little bit. And you with, for our listeners and viewers, you wouldn't say this about yourself, but you're a brilliant author, an illustrator, graphic designer, you're a storyteller at heart. And you're one of those people that Wynne and I, enjoy so much because you see life as a story.
Mhm.
Stories are everywhere. So we're just so curious for you to share more about, why this book is an impactful read for you. Tell us.
Sure, sure. And thank you guys for having me back. It's very happy to be here. I had a great time last time, and I'm excited to be back. Yes.
Us too.
Yay. Yes. Yes,
So this
yes.
book, I guess as an overall thing, that it's a self-help book with that helps you get into a good headspace to be creative. It's
Mhm.
not specifically about one outlet of creativity, about creating sculptures or drawing, painting, writing poetry or fiction, or making music. It's a general thing about getting into a headspace or more into a headspace, if that's your thrust about wanting to do that.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's how do you do it? And a big idea of this book is kind of rolls back the clock to when we were kids. And it's that here, talk about good headspace. Creating stuff just comes naturally, when
Yeah.
you're kids, that you pick up crayons and you go to town on a piece of paper. You pick up yarn and beads and whatever else you can find, and you make a sculpture, whatever it can be. And you're having fun doing it. It's a joyful thing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, and so you think of that as, that's a kind of goal headspace. And what happens to that? We grow up, we don't create as much.
Hmm.
Or if we do, we create stuff in school, for
Mhm.
projects.
Hmm.
And what happens with that? We're graded on it.
Mhm.
We're
Ooh.
graded. And that can
Yep.
cause the start of
Yep.
anxiety, of worrying about, am I going to get, A, B, whatever on this? And so creating
Yeah.
stuff can become a chore, rather than the fun, just do it and have fun and just be silly.
Mhm.
Anything
Hmm.
goes to, okay, my project has these guidelines and I have to meet those. And at the end, I'll be graded. So
Yeah.
that could introduce a bit of
Mhm.
static in the
Yeah.
headspace. And another thing, kind of that's one branch. And another branch is that, of course, as we grow up, we learn about the world. And part of that is great. It's great for our safety that when we're taking a walk, we need to stop in an intersection. We
Mhm.
need to wait for the stoplight to turn red.
Yes.
Traffic is supposed to stop then. It's safe for us to walk across the street. We check for traffic too if there's no stoplight. So those things we learn are fantastic for us. But we also learn some stuff that is probably not as fantastic, that the world is set up, and this may be more of a cultural, rather than, this is for your safety thing like
Hmm.
stoplights, but a cultural thing of the world is set up, the culture is set up in certain ways.
Mhm.
And I'll use an example that I have twin daughters, and we've had this conversation a few times that you go into a clothing store, you look at the boys section, and then you look at the girls section, and you can see differences. And you look at, say, let's say the t-shirts. I mean,
Yeah.
like jeans can be dark blue or whatever. But you look at the t-shirts. The boys' shirts, they could tend to be bold colors. Like you got your dark blue, you got your red. They could have dinosaurs on them, a cool lizard on a skateboard. They got some rad epic stuff, right? And then you look over again at the girls section of t-shirts. Well, how are they different? They could have softer colors. They could
Hmm.
have butterflies on them, unicorns, maybe sparkles.
Yeah.
There's that different setup for you. And there was that question of, well, what if you're a girl and you want to wear a t-shirt with a dinosaur on it, riding a
Hmm.
skateboard?
Hmm.
Or if
Right.
you're a
Hmm.
boy and you want to have a t-shirt with butterflies and sparkles and whatever else, that
Yeah.
maybe you won't find it at that particular clothing store. Maybe you could go
Hmm.
on Etsy or some other place. I'm sure there's
Hmm.
out there of like there's, in general of print on
Yeah.
demand, right?
Mhm.
You can go there, but I guess it's that my point is that when we're out in the world, we learn those things that the world is set up in a certain way.
Yeah.
And to go against that is that raises the possibility of being seen as weird.
Hmm.
That if you are a girl wearing a dark blue shirt with a dinosaur on it, people might like think, oh, some people might think you're weird. And that kind of raises that idea that weird can have a negative connotation,
Mhm.
that it could be used as a put down.
Hmm.
That, hey, they're weird, they're an oddball. They're not
Hmm.
doing here I'm for the listeners, I'm raising my fingers in air quotes.
Right.
Hmm. Hmm.
You're not doing what you're supposed to do.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
the book here says, this Felicia Day's book, Embrace Your Weird, is to say weird doesn't have to be a put down. Weird can have, you're limiting the word by only having as a put down that weird can be wonderful,
Mhm.
that you don't have to go along with trends. You can be weird, you can have quirks.
Yeah.
What is the Wynness of Wynne or the Vickiness of Vicky? Like that's
Mhm.
you have the quirks that make you you,
Mhm.
Hmm.
um, compared to everybody else around you.
Yeah.
And so it's the book really is that, hey, it teaches you weird is fine. It's worthy of celebration.
Hmm.
And throughout the
Mhm.
book, there are exercises to kind of, to make you think about this. And it asks you to think about when you were a kid, what were you into that maybe you grew out of, quote unquote? Maybe you were into dragons and Pegasus, I guess, Pegasuses, dinosaurs that rode skateboards or whatever else that
Yeah.
you were into that stuff.
Hmm.
And you grew out of it because you thought, oh, that's silly. I don't want to do that stuff anymore.
Right.
But you don't have to, of course, do that. That you can have passions or obsessions now that fuel your excitement.
Mhm.
That, hey, it's whatever that gets your blood going quicker.
Yeah.
It's you can be really into, and it's the setup is that headspace of you don't have to do everything like you did as a kid, but if that goal is a headspace of how cool it was to create when you were a kid. um I'll finish that my long my long answer with the I guess a kind of stereotype, the scenario of the location is an art museum. It's an exhibit of this abstract modern art, right?
Mhm.
And a guy's walking through it and he's scratching his head and he's like, this stuff is so weird and basic. My kid could make this stuff.
Mm.
But isn't it cool that, yeah, your kid could and the artist did, and,
Mhm.
and so I guess you turn that around and think maybe an artist is somebody who remembers the excitement of creating when they were a kid
Ooh.
Mhm.
and they learned the limitations like everybody else, but they got to the point where they could lessen those limitations in their minds,
Mhm.
put those to the side, and free up that space
Yeah.
Right.
to, I can create this wild abstract stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
some people will say, it's weird. My kid can make this stuff. But other people will say, holy smokes, that's incredible. I'm going to stand in front of this and it's going to make me think of this myriad, this wild world of
Yeah.
inside this painting. So,
Mhm.
Yeah.
yeah. So
You
that's
know
a kind of a rambling answer, but
No, it's great.
what I love about that is it goes back to our previous podcast that we did with you when you talked
Hmm.
about seeing your daughters creating and what that
Yes.
inspired in you. You know, you were like, well,
Mm-hmm.
they can sit and draw, so I'm going to sit and
Mm-hmm.
draw. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
it's amazing how, two answers, months apart, but it's
Yeah.
the same thing of getting into that headspace.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Well, and I think that the creativity and conformity that you just talked
Hmm.
about, Dave, I think Felicia Day does such a great job of this. And as I was reading, I immediately seized up because she asks the readers, and I'm not you. She says, get your pen, get your crayon, get whatever,
Hmm.
and here's a blank page, and I'm going to give you an activity or something to help you unleash, but I
mhm.
want you to draw. And I immediately went, no. Uh, no, no, no can do. I'll go get another piece of paper, but I'm not going to mark up this book with something that's going to be like not worthy. And so I
Mhm.
think, what I love about you bringing this book to us is that what you said at the beginning, it applies to all the creatives and all
Mhm.
that judging we do, where we put ourselves down before we've even gotten started. Uh,
Mhm.
it's that thing that we do. And so this boosting creativity and helping people to be confident, you see that as a byproduct or an outcome of reading this book?
Yeah, I think so. And it's and when it's awesome that you mentioned about the previous podcast that I was on and talked about that because you're so right. I had that for years where I was, I grew up loving books. I grew up in working in a bookstore, my grandparents' bookstore, and especially science fiction stuff. Loved it. And then as I grew older, it's that term of like science fiction geekery that I didn't want to be seen as that. And so I pushed that down of
Mhm.
I want to, hide it in my trying to be cool and not a geek. And seeing my daughters create, that was the click to say, I want to do that again.
Right.
That was so fun. And that helped me as far as, you know, it was before I read this book and it
Mhm.
was might as well embrace my weird. And that's through I finger painted, I
Mhm.
drew,
Mhm.
I embraced that. I went back to enjoying that science
Yeah.
fiction and being okay with that and saying, hey, I'm a geek, that's part
Right.
of who I am.
Well,
Uh,
there's so much in
yeah.
parenting where we get to be reminded of how we formed, and we
Yeah.
get to pick up on those clues. I love that you did that.
But yeah, Dave, one of the things that really struck me is that Felicia Day, she's got a background as an actor, performer. She's creative in so many ways, but she also touched on kind of some mental health things. On
Mhm.
page 104, she writes about anxiety and how important it is to have agency and power, in
Mhm.
our
Yeah.
lives. And how, when I read that, I thought, oh my gosh, that is something that's such a barrier for people in the ways that you've already described, that we
Mhm.
judge ourselves, we put ourselves down. And, as parents,
Mhm.
that's the last thing that you want to do. But
Mhm.
I do think creativity helps to boost confidence. But tell us more about that, from your perspective. How
Mhm.
does it empower, being creative, getting past that fearfulness of I'm not worthy, I dare not, do this because I'm not an artist, I'm not a writer, I'm not fill in the blank.
Right, right. And just to backtrack just a little bit, you mentioned about Felicia Day, and to give just a little background that yes, she has written this book, and she wrote a book before that, "You're Never Weird on the Internet," which I think it's like it's kind of into this similar issue. But she has starred in, let me see the about the author section. She's been on the shows of Supernatural and The
Yeah.
Magicians and Mystery Science Theater 3000. So just as a kind of a side,
Yeah.
just a little background on her. But as far as your question, though, I wrote down, I made sure to, for the listeners, you can't see, but I have the copy of the book here, and it's got these purple post-it notes on different pages.
Yes, we'll
But I
vouch for
wanted
you.
to,
Yes.
I
Yes.
wanted to, but I wanted to get you right from the a quote from the book itself that I really like this. Um, and it goes, looking at creativity as a release valve for big feelings is a
Mhm.
wonderful way to rid ourselves of the inhibition that I need to be perfect when I make.
Ooh.
That's kind of like that you
Ooh.
throw a pebble in a pond and the ripples, right? The resonating, because
Yeah.
and it's not just the anxiety of needing to be perfect when you make things. It's just that overall. And
Yeah.
for the listeners out there, I consider myself an anxious person. I have anxiety, goes beyond just making things. And this book helped me with kind of thinking about that because
Mm-hmm.
Felicia Day in her book talked about that is a big block to creativity,
Yeah.
is that fear that whatever you make won't be good enough.
Yep.
Right.
And that's that phrase of, it's either perfect or good enough, but then you can ask the question or questions, good enough for what though?
Mhm.
It's if you're drawing or painting, are you saying it's good enough that it looks realistic like a
Mhm.
photograph? Is
Oh,
that the
right.
level?
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Is it good enough that if you're writing a song that it becomes a huge hit on YouTube, that it gets a million likes on YouTube or
Mhm.
Instagram or wherever? That I guess you need to question, what does it mean to be good enough?
Right.
Yeah.
Because and you also can open yourself to the possibility that creating an artwork, wherever it is, a song, a drawing, whatever, can be fun on its own.
Mhm.
Again, like
Yeah.
being a kid,
Yeah.
it could be a joyful, when you
Yeah.
go home from work or before you go to work or whatever, you're on your lunch break. You're sketching a building across the street, whatever. It could be a joyful moment in your
Yeah.
life.
Mhm.
It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be good enough for publication or anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you don't have to even show anybody. You can have a
Right.
No.
sketchbook full of ideas and drawings and
Right.
whatever, ideas for a skyscraper, whatever. You don't have to show anybody that,
Right.
No. And one of the things I marked on page 250, she presents a list of, reasons to create. And one of them is create for no reason.
Right.
Yeah.
Make mistakes, be curious, ask why, accept differences. And I think it speaks to what you're saying, Dave, about
Mhm.
kind of enjoying the process. And Wynne and I both, we're outcome sisters. Like, what's it
Mhm.
going to look like? Where are we
Right.
going? Is it going to be good? And I think when you get so wrapped up in that, you forget that there should be some joy in the doing,
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah.
right?
That's
Right.
that is a big, big deal, I think.
Yeah.
And as far as the book goes, it's a big, lesson to try to get across and to absorb.
Mm-hmm.
That's one that it doesn't have to be publicized.
Yeah.
And the thing is, what you had mentioned about making mistakes,
Mhm.
that's another part of the book, is that, hey, it's okay to make mistakes,
Right.
and that actually reminded me of when I think you blogged about this recently, where you had a quote from Neil Gaiman about making mistakes. And I actually made a note of that.
Mhm.
So I'll
Mhm.
throw another quote your way. It says, Neil Gaiman said, because if you're making mistakes, then you are making new things, trying new things, learning, living, pushing yourself, changing yourself,
Right.
changing your world. So make new mistakes, make glorious, amazing mistakes. I mean,
Mhm.
that is that is that is fantastic. Make glorious, amazing mistakes. What
Right.
good advice.
Right.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's so good.
It is so good. And the other thing that I love about all of that is that creativity as a process, but as a way to process,
Yeah.
all the
Oh,
stuff that's going on in the headspace, which is really hard
oh,
to put
yeah,
down in words
yeah,
sometimes, but there's, finger paint can sometimes be amazing.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
Well, and I think cultivating the quiet,
Mhm.
to do all of that is something that people are hungry for,
Mhm.
so that those things can kind of surface. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. I really like what you said, Wynne, of it could be a process of sorting out. I mean, if we're going through grief or
Mhm.
something is frustrating us, you
Mm-hmm.
could have stream of consciousness writing or drawing,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and that could help you unblock or
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
just to think things, even if you or even if not you're thinking things through, it could just be a time of quiet,
Mhm.
in your
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
um
Yeah.
yeah. And another, I don't know if she really mentioned this in the book, but another thing I would kind of tack up on that, if
Mm-hmm.
we have a bulletin board, I like to tack up another
Yeah.
piece in that section,
Okay. Mm-hmm.
that for me, the process of creating that, you have an idea in your mind, an image of how this thing is going to look.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the time, maybe most of the time, that what comes out doesn't look like what you had in your mind,
Mhm.
or it looks
Yeah.
different.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that that certainly can be frustrating. It could be disappointing. However, this is kind of like the word weird, where it's, yes, there are negative connotations to it, but there are also positives. That when the piece doesn't look like you anticipated, it could surprise you, and it could open yourself up to
Mm-hmm.
really neat surprises.
Mhm.
That, hey, I wasn't expecting that,
Yeah.
but I created that. And how neat is that? And this kind of circles back to your question about anxiety, that what if you created something that surprised you and delighted you, and you can remember that later, to say, when those naggy little voices come in and
Yeah.
say, what if you're not good enough?
Mhm.
You could say, hey, I was good enough last week, last month,
Mm-hmm.
Right.
those other times,
Yeah.
that, man, it was strange and it was different.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked what I did,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and
Yeah.
you sort of, I mean, maybe what we expect to create is what everybody else would create.
Mm.
And what
Ooh.
maybe what we
Mm-hmm.
really create
Yeah.
is a reflection of our own selves.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's going back to kind of the beginning.
Yeah.
What's like, this is what's the Wynnness of Wynn, and how is
Right.
that different from everybody else who's not Wynn?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
Well,
Yeah.
and I think, one of I hadn't thought about this until just now, but what you're both describing is, not to go down a psychology rabbit hole, but I think it's really easy to get sucked into needing external validation
Mhm.
about worth. And when
Mhm.
you create and it becomes part of a public domain, you need to kind of steel yourself for that. But then to be bounced around by the feedback or people's impressions, the difference between, getting swept up by external validation when it's all good and then something not so good happens, you need that internal, sort of that the guidance, the compass to do what you said, Dave. But I like it. I
Right.
see the worth in it. And gosh, that's a hard thing for people. It's a
Mhm.
gift you give yourself, but boy, it's a gift that gets returned a lot, right? No, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my goodness,
Yeah.
so good.
Yeah, it's that, I guess it's that being kind to yourself, to say,
Mhm.
I don't have to show this sketch to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't have to go in the public, but it has value to me.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
that's very, very worthwhile. Yeah.
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 Wow. This is so, so good. Well, and I know, from a creative point of view, Day also in her book, she very generously makes mention of other books that have inspired her creativity. And
Mhm.
so we'll have to, tease our listeners and readers to go learn about that. But there are a lot of volumes there that we would all head nod and go, oh, yeah, those are things that, it's a process
Mhm.
and you have to keep at it, right?
It is. It is. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are other books, and some of them are particular to say writing or drawing. But what I like
Yeah.
about her book of Felicia Days is that it's quite a generality of we're not going down one certain outlet
Mhm.
Hmm.
of creativity. It's just you can apply this to a lot of things on the spectrum.
Right.
Absolutely. And you can pick it up and start anywhere, put it down, pick it up again.
Mhm.
So it's like a handy resource if you feel, I think, kind of stuck
Mhm.
and you want to get re-engaged, go back to it. So I think it's a good thing for inspiration.
Mhm.
Just
It
like
is.
visiting with both of you. Good for inspiration. Yes.
Yes, I like it.
Yes, I do
Yes.
too.
Thank you so much, Dave. It's always a pleasure to speak with you. And Wynne and I are just so happy, right, to learn from you. And this was a great find. And we're just thrilled to have had time with you today.
Yeah.
Oh, same here. It's wonderful to have a conversation with you guys, especially, I mean, I get excited about creativity and all that. So
Yeah.
it
Well,
was great. So thank
and
you
it
for having me. Yeah.
and it is the ripple that keeps paying it forward because we talk about it and
Yeah.
it burgeons out to all the listeners that get inspired too. So thank you so
Oh,
much for your time.
Thank
definitely.
you.
Definitely. Thank you guys.
Thank you.